This is the day the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
This time my wife has a problem, and so we brought her here, and we're sure that this is going to be her answer too.
I wrote a letter to a friend that I'm hoping I can get down here. And I said, next thing to heaven, this is it.
We are going to take a look at a place with a peaceful and supportive atmosphere, where appreciation of life is strongly enhanced.
I decided that it would be a good time of year to be here and try to heal my body naturally because I knew a lot about the wheatgrass program.
Coming here, it's a situation, is ideal. It takes the stress off you because when you try to do it on your own, it's very difficult.
It just has a supportive atmosphere, and I guess it's the detoxification physically as well as mentally that helps me feel better.
People come for many reasons, from degenerative diseases to simply being overweight. Some participate just because they want to change their eating habits and cleanse their bodies. Many are here for the second and third times. They come because they know the program works for them, and they need the discipline and reassurance that this special environment gives. What is this special place? It is the Health Institute of San Diego.
They're very spacious and nice. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the grounds, and thank you so much.
The founder and driving force behind the Health Institute of San Diego is Raychel Solomon.
Each of us has a dream, an urge to make our lives more meaningful. I had lost 2 sisters to cancer. I lost my husband of 36 years to kidney failure. I saw friends suffering the agony of arthritis, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, ulcers, emphysema, high blood pressure, colitis. I felt compelled to do something to help stem this epidemic trend. My dream crystallized.
More than 14,000 people have passed through the Health Institute since it began. It has been an indelible experience, one that will be with them for the rest of their lives.
like the best of everything.
Your body is wonderful. Given the proper tools, it is self-cleansing and self-healing. In this video, Dr. Dan Pfeffer will explain how your body continuously eliminates toxins and assimilates nutrients in order to maintain its optimum level of functioning. He will also provide you with some useful tips on how you can help your body achieve optimum physical health. In order to achieve optimum physical health, toxins must be released from your body. In this class, Dr. Pfeffer explains the various ways in which your body eliminates these toxins. He also gives some tips on how you can help your body in its self-cleansing process.
Hello, my name is Dr. Dan Pfeffer, and I'm here today to talk with you on the topic of elimination. And this workshop is basically about letting go. It's about how the body works to let go of the toxins and the poisons in it. Also, how we can facilitate that process to allow healing to take place and rejuvenation to take place in our systems. I'm going to focus mostly on how the body works, the different organ systems, and what we can do to facilitate that process of letting go of what we don't need. But I also wanted to start off by saying that we really have to look at also the emotional and mental aspects of letting go, because that's equally as important. And I'm not going to stress it, but I wanted to start off by saying that it's really time to let go of what we don't need in our life, what doesn't serve us, what is causing stress, negative thoughts like I can't or I won't, or ideas that I'm sick and I'm never going to get better. It's time to really replace those with positive thoughts and get rid of those old programming and conditioning tapes. So that's what I wanted to start off with. I recently had the opportunity of moving and cleaning out all my closets and my garage, and I really saw what I've been holding on to for most of my life. It was a very good symbolic way of letting go and cleansing. And that's really what the body does all the time. It lets go and cleanses what it doesn't need if you allow it, if you don't keep putting more and more stuff in that it doesn't need and doesn't use. So we're going to talk about the physical process of letting go, how the body works in that respect. But keep in mind that there's a greater overview, and health involves a balance of also the emotional and mental aspects of being and of letting go, and also taking in what you need, as well as letting go of what you don't need. When we talk about detoxification and cleansing, which is what we really focus on in this program, we're talking about a way of life where the body is allowed to eliminate easily. And sometimes in the process of elimination or detoxifying, you may notice symptoms coming up. You may get rashes or headaches or feel flu-like, fevers, joint pain. All sorts of symptoms come up. You may not have them. Some people do, some people don't. But I just want to emphasize that in the process of cleansing, you may feel worse before you feel better. The first system I'd like to talk about as to how we eliminate is respiration. And by that I'm talking about breathing in the lungs, taking in oxygen, and letting go, eliminating waste products from the body, particularly carbon dioxide. And taking in oxygen is really crucial for our health. We can go for days without eating and hours without drinking, but only seconds without breathing. It's the most crucial function that we have in our body. So taking oxygen in is something that I really wanted to focus on. Now, breathing is, as I said, important for getting oxygen in. Also, diet, like wheatgrass juice, is also a good example of how you can bring more oxygen into your system. That's why we recommend that very highly. When we breathe, we want to emphasize slow, deep, even breathing. A lot of times we've been brought up, we get stressed out and we just hold our breath and our body gets all tense. And that's conditioning. And I want you to notice the next time you feel stressed, instead of maybe just sort of freezing like this or going to eat something to relieve that stress, I want you just to stop and take a deep breath. And it will relax you, it will really just sort of get you centered, and you'll be able to really go on, and the stress will not stay in your body. Breathing is also not only important for bringing in oxygen, but also for getting rid of carbon dioxide. As I said, that's a waste product of the body. And carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen. It tends to stay more in the bottom of the lungs. And so we really need to breathe deeply, and when we exhale, we need to breathe out all that carbon dioxide from the bottom of our lungs. Now, because it tends to settle down there. So if we're just shallowly breathing and not breathing real fully and not exhaling this carbon dioxide, it just sort of stays in there. It's like that dirty glass analogy I gave you. So I want to focus a little bit on breathing. Also in our lungs, we have 2 lungs, or most people have 2 lungs. And I'll just show it to you on the chart here. We have 2 lungs, and also on our bodies, a lot of times we think of our lungs as just being over here. You know, we breathe, we think of this as breathing. But our lungs really go down to our abdomen, they go up to the top of our neck, they're in the back for the most part. We have the heart in front of our left lung. And when you're breathing, you really want to try and bring as much oxygen into the lungs. And what I'd like to do is a little exercise with you for a few minutes, which you can do in more length each day, till you really get used to breathing, because most of us really don't breathe that way. I want you to think of the lungs as a balloon, and when you blow up a balloon, it gets bigger. If you put your hand on your abdomen and take a deep breath, that balloon is getting bigger, and you should feel a pushing outward. So why don't you just take a deep breath in, and you should feel your hand come out. And now breathe out, and the balloon is getting smaller, and your hand should go in. And that tells you that you're really moving that bottom part of your lung, because you have these abdominal stomach muscles that really help that movement, as well as the diaphragm. So what I'd like you to do for a few minutes each day is to sit down quietly and practice this deep, even breathing. And just sit down with your head erect and exhale first, and then breathe the way I showed you. Put your hand on your abdomen so you can feel that lungs expanding and then contracting as you breathe out. And also try breathing slowly. You might want to count to 5 or 8 or so. As you're breathing in, hold it and then breathe out, and also count to 8. Because they've found that when you breathe slowly, there's a good chance that you're really getting more oxygen in and more carbon dioxide out. And they've even found that, like certain species that breathe very fast, like monkeys will breathe like 30 times a minute, they only live to be 25 years old on the average, whereas man, we breathe about 12 to 18 times a minute, we live to be about 70. And elephants and tortoises and snakes, they breathe 2 to 4 times a minute, and they live to be over 100. So, practice that slow, deep, even breathing, and get that rich oxygen into your system and that carbon dioxide, those waste products out. And also exercise. A very mild form of exercise each day is really helpful to get those lungs working. Now, another form of elimination of the body is when we sweat, our perspiration. And I'm wondering, how many people here use antiperspirants? 1? Okay, there's usually a few people that do. And I want you to imagine you go to your doctor, and he says, well, I think we're going to sew up your colon, your rectum, and we're just going to leave you that way. How many people would just do that without thinking about it? Well, it's the same thing when you use an antiperspirant, because we have pores in our skin that are there with sweat glands to really release those toxins in our body. And if you stink, literally, if you have an odor coming from your body, it's because you really need to be getting rid of those toxins. So you don't want to use antiperspirants to cover that up. You don't want to mask the symptoms. You want to allow the body to eliminate naturally, because the skin is like the largest organ in the body, and its main function is protection and also elimination of these toxins through the sweat. So a lot of times, as I said, we really have very severe body odor, especially when we're on a cleansing diet. A lot of stuff is being let go of, so you may notice an increase or an exacerbation of that during this process. Also, just the typical average American diet, the kinds of foods we eat, meat, pasta, dairy, tend to stay in our system a long time. Dr. Burkitt is a doctor who studied how long food stays in our systems, and he found that it's about 3 to 5 days on the average for people when they eat a meal for it to fully go through the system. And try and imagine taking some meat, some ground round, putting it in a plastic bag, leaving it out in the sun, because that's sort of the temperature our body is at. It's sort of a warm, moist environment. And imagine what that would smell like. And that's why, with the way most of us eat, we have that kind of body odor. So as you sort of change your diet and go more to live foods and vegetables and fruits that are uncooked, and as you start cleansing, that body odor will, disappear. Also, most of the detoxification that we go through happens at night, and that's just something to be aware of. So when you wake up in the morning, you may feel tired, you may have a coated tongue. One of the things I like to recommend is when you get up in the morning, to take a spoon and just sort of stick your tongue out, and this is in the process of brushing your teeth afterwards, and just sort of scrape the tongue and get whatever coat is off of your tongue. Just sort of take the spoon and just sort of very lightly just sort of scrape off whatever is accumulated, because that's a waste product and you'll just be facilitating that process along. Also bathe or shower in the morning if you can, because that's when all the toxins have come out on your body. So that's the best time. And exercising. Sweat is a really good thing. You really want to get those pores open and have the toxins released. And any form of mild exercise, walking, the trampoline is an excellent way of really sort of not only focusing on your breathing, but also getting this, the toxins out of your system. It starts the lymphatic system flowing. So anything that's been accumulating in the lymphatic system will actually be sort of moved on and eliminated better if you exercise, if you go on the trampoline. And that's one of the things I wanted to focus on. Your lymphatic system is a very important system, and circulation in general is, I think we're familiar with the heart and the blood and the vessels. The heart, pumps the blood, it takes in oxygen from the lungs, and really what we want to focus on is really getting that oxygen in and also getting that circulation flowing. Now the lymphatic system is sort of parallel, runs parallel to the regular blood circulatory system, only it doesn't have a pump, there's no heart. And what it depends on for movement is exercise in the muscles and breathing. So that's why it's important, to do things like the trampoline and to do things that really get that flowing. Our lymphatic system is a way that the body cells, all of the cells of our body give off waste products, and the lymphatic system is one way that those waste products get filtered out and then eliminated. They get filtered, then reabsorbed in a broken down form into the blood and then eliminated through the kidneys, through the colon. So it's a very important system. You really want to make sure that you're helping that lymphatic system going. And another way you can really do that is what is called skin brushing. And I have here two ways of doing that. This is a loofah sponge, and you can buy them anywhere. And this is called a vegetable bristled brush. You can also buy in most health food stores. And what skin brushing is a way of brushing your skin before you've gone into the shower, when your skin is still dry. What you want to do is you want to brush your skin very lightly all over your body, and this helps stimulate the lymphatic system to flow, and also gets rid of any debris on your skin, any dead skin cells, and really helps for further elimination from your skin. So what you want to do every day, maybe even twice a day, in the morning and at night, is just skin brush. And what you do is you always brush to your heart. So you start on your arms, and you go up very lightly. Obviously, you wouldn't have your clothes on when you're doing this. And you go up this way and down to your heart. And you can do that a few times very lightly. You're not scraping your skin. You're doing it lightly. And you do all your arms towards the heart. And you also do your legs. You come up on both sides. And you just do this every day. You'll notice your skin's going to get smoother. It's going to start releasing toxins. And also, you're going to feel better. And it really does get that lymphatic system flowing. And also, you want to go down this way to the heart and up this way to the heart as well, just to get that stimulated. And you can also do your face, although I recommend doing it very lightly. You might want to use a loofah sponge more like this, just very lightly on your face as well. So that's a very important process of elimination, helping your skin to release. So between that and the trampoline and exercise, these are all very good ways of getting your lymphatic system flowing. Also your diet. When you're eating live foods, cleansing foods, fenugreek sprouts, for instance, are real cleansing for the blood and lymphatic system in the kidneys. So when you really have a good diet, also that lymphatic system starts flowing. Now, there are other ways that our body rids toxins. One that we're most familiar with are the kidneys, or urination. And we have two kidneys. They're about the shape of an earlobe. Or in medical school, we always called them beans. They were called beans because they were that shape, like kidney beans, obviously. And they're in the back, located in the back. And we have a diagram over here as well. I have to lift up this chart. So you see here, they're located in the back, and they look like these little earlobes as well. And a lot of times people have a tendency when they have to urinate they tend to weigh, they hold it in, and especially, you know, you may be sort of don't want to leave the room or you don't want to excuse yourself, but I really think you have to just trust your body and excuse yourself, especially when you're on a cleansing program, because a lot of what cleansing foods, live foods are, it's mostly water content, and that's why it's so cleansing. It really rejuvenates and cleans out. So you're really going to be going to the bathroom a lot more, urinating a lot more than usual when you're on a detoxing cleansing program. The other thing to talk about in the kidneys is what the function of the kidneys are. They filter out poisons from the system. Mechanically, it's like an actual filter. Also, chemically, they're really responsible for regulating the blood chemistries. Our body is really sort of an electric field, electromagnetic field, and the kidneys are responsible for keeping that electrical balance, those elements in the body that help that going along in balance. So they're very, very important. You want to avoid coffee. You want to avoid salt. You also want to try and drink a lot of purified water as well. And also Rejuvelac. You really want to take in a lot of water and Rejuvelac to really clean out your systems. And the other thing, a lot of times you'll be burning, especially men, or actually not only men, but women as well, will notice a burning when they urinate. And that's important. You may have an infection. You may need to go see a physician about that. But also, a lot of times that's a process of cleansing as well when you're going through this kind of program. And people will complain of having to urinate quite frequently. And as I said, this could be related also to an infection. But also, when you're on this kind of cleansing program, you tend to be taking in a lot of water in your foods. So that's very common. In men, very often, the prostate can be enlarged. It's a very common complaint. And sometimes that's related to the diet men have been eating. A lot of times, if they're not getting a lot of vegetables, if they're lacking in calcium, magnesium, chromium, zinc, vitamin F, and such, which is very common when you're not eating organically grown produce, then you may have an enlarged prostate as well. And a lot of times, just getting the right kind of diet, a live food diet, will help that process. Also, eating, a lot of times people have recommended organically grown and soaked pumpkin seeds to help that. And also the fenugreek sprouts are very good for that. So that's one of the reasons for increased frequency of urinating. Also, sometimes you have a pressure on the bladder, which is the result of really related to your colon not really being cleansed. So it's heavier. The transverse colon, which goes across the body, can actually push down on all your organs, and there may be a pressure there. So that's another possibility as well. So as you cleanse your colon, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, you may actually notice lessening of those kind of symptoms. Another way the body releases in women is during the menstruation process. That's a very, very common way of getting rid of all sorts of toxins and poisons in the system regularly. It's a very classic kind of thing when people are very toxic to really have painful menstruations. And so you may also notice that your symptoms will change throughout a cleansing and detoxing program. Also, we recommend, through the Health Institute, wheatgrass juice douches occasionally as well, and you'll hear more about that. But I just wanted to mention that that's another example of the way the body eliminates. So we've talked pretty much about urination, perspiration, respiration. I want to focus on sort of probably the most obvious one we haven't covered, which is defecation or elimination through the colon. And this is probably, a lot of people have said that the colon is the key to health. If you could have a healthy colon, then you can be very healthy and you can really eliminate. And that makes a lot of sense because what does the colon do? It helps for absorbing nutrients into the body. The fecal matter comes through the small intestines. The food comes through the small intestines. It's in a liquid form. It's converted to a solid. The nutrients are absorbed. The liquid nutrients are finally absorbed into the body. And also, the waste products are released as a solid. If your colon isn't functioning, you're not getting in the end result of this incredible digestive process your body has been going through. And also, you're clogging up the works. It's like a drain of a sink. And if it gets clogged up, everything backs up. And try and imagine having a dinner party and having all these dishes in the sink, and then the drain is clogged. The first place, obviously, is to work on unclogging the drain, so then you can clean the dishes. But of course, it takes a while to clean the dishes. And it's the same thing with the cleansing program. Once you get the colon functioning and cleaned and working normally, then you actually have to start working on the cells of the body and cleansing those and rebuilding. So it's a long process, considering the kind of diet and lifestyle most people have led. But the colon's the place to begin. That's the place where you really have to focus to get that cleansing. And as I said, food in our diet tends to stay in our body a long time. The average American diet, consists of things that I like to call goo and glue, because that's just what they do in our system. And try and imagine like you're in a supermarket and you're going to buy a carton of eggs and you see the egg is cracked in one of the cartons. Notice how sticky that egg shell is to the carton. You can hardly get it off. It's glued in there. Or flour, lots of bread and flour products. As a kid, I always used to use flour and water to make paste for paper mache. Milk products, dairy, all very mucus producing. So what happens is we take in all of this kind of food plus a lot of meat products that don't get easily digested and stay in the system for days and start putrefying. And you just sort of have all this glue and you have all that sort of waste product just sticking to the sides of the colon. And also, by the way, the colon and the large intestine are the same thing in case I start interchanging those when I'm talking. So it starts sticking to the wall of the colon, and it's building up so the food, the nutrients aren't absorbed, and also you're getting blocked up and stuffed up, and things are staying in your system longer and rotting, and really harmful bacteria is starting to flourish. And that's why people feel so sick and so tired and have headaches, and after they eat they're exhausted, they wake up in the morning, they don't feel good. And that's all a process of being toxic because your body isn't eliminating the poisons as it's meant to. And there are lots of things you can do to help that along. First of all, I just also wanted to show you where the colon is before I continue as to what you can do to facilitate the process. But the colon on this chart here, we have the small intestines over in this direction, and then we have the colon here. It goes up and then across the body and then down again and out. On our body, I'll just show it to you on my body, we have the small intestines in this area. I always think this is our stomach, but that's also small intestines over here. Here's the beginning of the large intestines, or the colon. And it comes up this way, and then goes across to the left, and then it goes down again, and then out. So once again, it goes up this way, across, and then down and out. And also, it has sort of like little pockets as it goes across as well. And the way it works is there's a normal peristaltic motion. It's like a wave of contractions that helps release the food and the waste product. And also these pockets also twist a bit, and that's to allow nutrients to be absorbed and also helps for further elimination. Now, as I say, when we have all this goo and glue, things build up, and our colon isn't functioning real well, and things get stopped, the works get stopped up, we get very toxic. One of the ways, and also a lot of times people say, well, I have very good bowel movements, I have a bowel movement a day, and really we should have a bowel movement for every meal that we have during the day, and it shouldn't take more than maybe 20 minutes to a half hour after we eat for this to happen if our body was functioning with a normal peristalsis. There are ways to really get the body to function normally. One of them, of course, is with a good diet, live foods. That wet pulp helps clean out the small intestines and the colon. Also, avoiding meat products and the goo and the glue and the pasta and the dairy products will really help also get things flowing through. Exercise, getting that part of your body moving helps. It doesn't have to be rigorous exercise, just any kind of stretching that uses the abdominal muscles a little bit will help that. The other thing is just when we go to the bathroom, when we're on the toilet, the way our toilets are designed, we sit in a very unnatural way, and we have the very end of the colon or large intestine is called the sigmoid colon. It sort of curves. And a lot of cultures, what they do when they defecate is they squat, because this helps actually the body naturally release from the sigmoid colon. What we can do is actually have a stool 8 to 10 inches by our toilet or something to put our feet up and just sort of keep our feet up like this to sort of get that squatting position, which will help the body further eliminate what it's holding on to. Otherwise, excess matter starts accumulating. So we really want to get the sigmoid colon to release the food, the waste products as well. And so that's one thing. Also, enemas and colonics are an excellent way of cleaning out the colon. What they do is they really get all that debris and waste matter that's glued onto the walls. They start cleaning that out. And very, very important way, the enemas, for helping to dislodge all of that fecal matter and goo and glue that I've been talking about, and really allow the body to have the colon to have its normal peristalsis so it can actually eliminate better, and also so you can take in the nutrients when there's not all that debris on the walls of the colon. And I also
100. Call today.
A&E returns to Robert Altman's Three Women.
Yes.
I'm home.
Doubles lately.
Oh, hi.
2. Anybody want another drink?
I'd
love one, Rich.
Thanks. You're supposed to be resting, Pinky. What do you think I'm doing?
Wheatgrass juice implants are important for other reasons. They help nourish the system. They help bring in the electrolytes that may have been lost from enemas and colonics. And also, they are a good way to get to the liver. You know, we always say that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Well, the way to anybody's liver is through their colon. And by doing a wheatgrass implant, it goes right through the blood into the liver, and it helps detoxify the liver. So you can really rebuild your system and balance out what's going on in your system just by really focusing on these kinds of steps to eliminate what you don't need, the waste, the poisons, and bring in the good food, the good oxygen, the good way of looking at the world. You know, replace those negative thoughts, those emotions that you have been holding in, let them out, eliminate stress from your life, learn how to handle stress. Try, you know, even when you may be doing your enemas and implants, you can maybe do affirmations or have positive thoughts that I allow myself to be healthy, happy, and whole. You can really integrate a program for yourself so that you can regain your strength, you can clean, you can heal. And that's what the body's made for, and that's what it's all about. You really can help this process along, and I hope you will. Thank you.
In order to nourish your body, foods must be properly digested. In this class, Dr. Pfeffer explains how the digestive system works and how the various organs and glands contribute to the digestive process.
Hello, my name is Dr. Dan Pfeffer, and I'm here today to talk with you on the topic of digestion. And by digestion, we're going to talk about how the body works to digest your food. When you take food in, what happens to it, how it's broken down from larger particles into nutrients that can be used and then absorbed by the body, and how the waste products are then eliminated. So that's going to be the major focus, and we're also going to talk about the types of food that one eats and how that affects the digestive process. Now, the digestive system is a 36-foot long tube going from the mouth all the way through the body to the anus. And a lot of times after we eat, you'll notice very often that you have a lot of gas, or you may be belching, you may be tired. And these are all indications that the digestive process is not working to its optimum. So what we're going to focus on is how one can sort of encourage our systems to do the jobs that they were meant to do. Now, I always ask people, where does the digestive process in the body start? And invariably they say in the mouth. That's where you start chewing food and so on. But I wanted to say that really digestion begins with the brain, with our thoughts. All we have to do is think about food or smell food, and the digestive process starts. The enzymes start flowing. We start getting ready for the food that's going to be coming. And you can even think of Pavlov's dogs. They were conditioned in a way using food just on that very principle. Now, when you're upset, or you're stressed out, or angry, or whatever might be going on, if you're emotional, and you start eating, or you start thinking about food, that's going to affect the digestive process. Some of the enzymes will be shut off as well, because the brain has an incredible impact on how we digest food and how our body works. So I'm trying to say, don't eat while you're upset. There are lots of reasons for that. One is the way the digestive juices flow. Also, when we're upset, we tend not to chew our food. We tend to swallow things incorrectly, and our food doesn't get digested. Now, when we start the digestive process, when we actually take food in, we start in the mouth. And This is a very important part of our body for digestion because that's where mechanical digestion takes place, where we break down the food into smaller particles by chewing it with our teeth. And also that's where chemical digestion takes place. We begin to digest starches into smaller nutrients called sugars that can then be used by our body. So two very important processes go on in our mouth in terms of digestion. Now, when we speak of mechanical digestion, we really have to grind up our food into almost a liquid pulp in order for those large particles to be made smaller so they then can be used by the body and absorbed and used for repair and assimilation and the functions of the body and energy. So that's very crucial. I like to recommend to people that they chew their food approximately 30 times, really grinding it up, and that really helps play a large role in being able to digest your food. A lot of us fall into sort of a slot machine pattern, I call it, where we have our food on a plate and we have our fork, and we sort of take our food to our mouth and our fork, and next thing we know, we're busy putting our food back into our mouth, and we're so focused on our fork, getting that fork to our mouth that we don't even bother to chew because we sort of fall into this pattern. So that's something to try and watch for, even if you have to sit on your hands a little bit for a few seconds if you tend to do that. Also, I like to recommend, whenever possible, to try and eat in silence, or at least not to be talking while you eat. When you talk while you eat, you tend not to chew your food. You also have a tendency, as you're talking, to let the food go down into your windpipe, and there's a possibility of choking. A lot of deaths occur each year because people are talking on the telephone and eating a sandwich or something, and they swallow a piece of whatever they're eating, and it sort of goes down into their lungs. And we have an epiglottis, a little flap in our throat that basically stops that from happening, but if we're talking, we're taking air into our body, and that flap is open, so we have to be real careful. So try and eat in silence, or try not to talk. Also, there's a real tendency when we eat to drink a lot of water or liquids. And if you tend to just take a bite of food in your mouth and drink and sort of wash the food down, you're not digesting anything. It's diluting the enzymes, and also you're not chewing. So that's another thing. Try not to drink liquids with meals. Try and drink them beforehand. Now, you can tell a lot about a person by their mouth and their teeth, and there have actually been studies. Dr. Price went around the country and looked at people's mouths and sort of correlated the health of people based on the quality of their teeth and also on the diet they had. And he found that those countries and cultures that ate a diet consisting of raw fruits and vegetables and really didn't have a lot of meat products tended to really have healthier teeth and also less degenerative illness. So you can learn a lot about somebody by their teeth. As far as the digestive process that takes place in the mouth, there's also the chemical digestion, the breakdown of starches into simple sugars. And to do this, the body manufactures what are called enzymes. And these are catalysts. They're like switches, like light switches. You need to have the catalyst to turn on the switch, the light can flow. Just as in the body, you need these enzymes to allow the molecules in the body to come together in a way that breaks down the food and allows energy to be gotten out of that, what you're taking in. So the enzyme in the mouth is called ptyalin, and that's spelled P-T-Y-A-L-I-N, ptyalin. And it's the chemical enzyme that's used in digesting starches. It breaks down starch into simple sugars. And that becomes important because if we by-step chewing our food and letting our food stay in our mouth long enough for the saliva with this enzyme to break it down, we're not digesting all our starch. So that's another good reason to really focus on chewing your food and letting your food be broken down in the mouth. Now, after we take the food in, it goes down from the mouth into the esophagus and down into the stomach. Now, again, our stomach is over here. It's this organ here. It's the largest, one of the largest parts of the digestive tube. The esophagus leads into it. And in our body, it's approximately around here. We tend to think our stomach's all the way down here, and it isn't. Now, our stomach is significant for a lot of reasons. It's a mixer. It's like a muscle where it mixes the food. It's like a blender almost. So that's where food combines in our system. When we take different foods in, it all sort of meets in the stomach and gets broken down. So there's a mechanical mixing and grinding and blending that goes on of the food to break it down. It's also the place where very often proteins are digested for the first time, and that becomes significant. Just like in our mouth is where the starch gets digested, when we first take in food, it's our stomach where the protein is first digested. And there are a series of enzymes in the stomach that are for that, and that includes hydrochloric acid as one of them that we've heard about, as well as pepsin. So we have a lot of things going on in our stomach. Primarily, the hydrochloric acid and the pepsin is breaking down the protein into amino acids. And amino acids are what our body needs as building blocks from the protein. It's no good to take in protein and not break it down to the amino acids. And that's also where diet becomes very important, because by the time we're age 35, let's say, we're lacking in a lot of hydrochloric acid based on the stress in our lives, the kinds of diets we've been eating. And because of this, we tend to have a depressed amount of this hydrochloric acid. We don't digest our proteins and break it down to amino acids. So people are always worried, well, am I getting enough protein? And they may be taking a lot of protein in, but they're not digesting it into these amino acids, which is really what the body needs. So diet becomes important because it's really good to try and focus on foods that allow you to digest your protein. Animal foods, meat, are harder to digest in that respect, whereas like a sprouts or a pre-digested food like that already has the proteins broken down to amino acids so that the body can use those nutrients with a very little amount of energy and work. So that's what our stomach is mostly for. Our stomach is for mechanical mixing and also for the breaking down of proteins to amino acids through the use of hydrochloric acid and pepsin and these different enzymes. So it has quite a function for our digestive process. Now, after we take in the food into our body, it goes through our stomach, it goes into a part of the small intestine called the duodenum or duodenum. And those are the first 8 inches of the small intestines. And the word duodenum, or duo, it means a second chamber. And that's a very important part of our digestive tract, because that's where a lot of digestion takes place as well. We get enzymes from the pancreas and from the liver that aid in the digestion that takes place in the duodenum. And let's say our pancreas is not functioning right, it's been stressed out, we're not going to get enough enzymes for the digestive process to take place. So what I'd like to do is focus a little bit on the pancreas and the liver and then talk more about the small intestine with you. The pancreas is this gland over here. A very important gland. It has 2 major functions. One is called an endocrine function, which has to do with the secreting of insulin. And insulin is the chemical in the body that controls the amount of blood sugar. So people, for instance, that are having problems with their insulin cannot control their blood sugar properly. The pancreas also has an exocrine function, which refers to a tube that goes from the pancreas, this little tube here, and goes into the duodenum. And what is secreted in this pancreas through this tube, this exocrine function, are enzymes as well. And these enzymes are used for the digestion of protein and for the digestion of starch. So whereas in the mouth we had digestion of starch, in the stomach we had digestion of protein, in the duodenum we have the final digestion of both protein and starch by these enzymes. Some of them are called trypsin and chymotrypsin. These are the ones that break down the proteins to amino acids further. And then there's one called amylase and some others that break down starch into simple sugars. And if you're the kind of person that notices that when you eat, let's say, you have all this gas, either you're belching or have flatulence, or you're just noticing that happening, it could very well mean that you're not having enough enzymes in your system to break down the food, that the food is remaining in your system longer, and that's what's causing the gas, because it's breaking down and it's basically rotting inside. That also has a lot to do with the health of the rest of your intestinal tract and how good your body is at cleansing and eliminating, as we talked about in other lectures. So that's pretty much what the pancreas is for. The liver is a very important organ. There are thousands of reactions that go in the liver. The liver is over here. It's a very large organ. Tucked underneath it is the gallbladder. And on our body, that would also be on our right side. Our liver is on our right side. And you can sort of, it's sort of right by where the ribs end. And the gallbladder is tucked underneath, which you can't really feel. And your liver is a very important organ. Besides all the chemical reactions that take place, the breaking down of proteins and converting them to sugars and sugars to proteins, it really is like a powerhouse of different types of reactions. It also makes bile, which is then stored in the gallbladder. And these are used for the breakdown and emulsification of fats, because fats also have to be broken down to these smaller substances that the body can then absorb and use. So the liver is very important in that respect as well. Now, if you have a system that's very toxic, that you're not getting rid of your waste products, your liver takes on the extra load of having to metabolize those and break those down. And so your liver will be very stressed out. Also, if you tend to drink a lot of alcohol, that has a way of really putting a real burden on your liver. We have enzymes in our liver that actually convert alcohol to chemicals called acetaldehyde that are normally broken down, but if the liver is really stressed out, it can't break them down. And acetaldehyde is sort of like, it sounds like formaldehyde for good reason. It's a very similar type of chemical which is used, formaldehyde is used for tanning, for the tanning process of leather and for embalming bodies, cadavers. And that's really what goes on in our body, when we're taking all this alcohol in and not breaking it down properly, if our livers are being too stressed out. So that's a sort of a terrible way to look at it, but that's what goes on. And that's why so many organs in your body are affected by drinking, not just your liver. And also these chemicals combine with oxygen and form free radicals, which some people think are associated with cancer and other types of illnesses. So you really want your liver to be functioning properly. All degenerative illnesses, you have their real start in the liver. If the liver were functioning normally, your body could handle all the stresses. So it's a very crucial part of the digestive system. So as I was saying, we have these enzymes and substances coming from the liver, the pancreas, into the duodenum, that first part of the small intestines. The small intestines is like a 22-foot long tube. It's quite long. This is an abbreviated chart version, but it's quite a long tube, and the duodenum is that first 8 inches that comes directly from the stomach. Now, the small intestines have a lot of functions. First, as we've talked about, is the digestive process, the digestion, the completed digestion of the amino acids and the 2 amino acids into sugars from the protein and the starches. Also, it has a function of absorbing nutrients into the body. So not only the digestion, but the absorption, the breaking down, but also taking into the body. And also it has bacteria in it. And these bacteria are good bacteria and bad bacteria. But the bacteria also aid in the further breakdown of the food in the system and the balancing of the chemistries involved. So there are a couple things I wanted to talk about. First, let me start with the bacteria aspect, because a lot of people say, oh my God, I have bacteria living in my body. This is terrible. And really, we have good bacteria as well as bad. And a lot of times in health food stores, they'll try and sell you acidophilus supplements and so on. And that's an example of the good bacteria we're talking about. You want that bacteria. Now, there's bacteria also in our body that most of us are supposed to have called bifidus. And usually we don't. The reason we don't is because the only way to get bifidus is to be breastfed during the first 3 days of life. That's how we get bifidus from our mother's milk. And very often, either we're not breastfed or we are breastfed, but then we have all this antibiotics that we take, or we are eating meat that has antibiotics and hormones used to produce the food that we're eating, and this destroys the bacteria. So you really want to have that bacteria in there. And there are good ways to replace that. One is a drink called Rejuvelac, which is a drink that's made from soaking spring weed in distilled water, and you drink let it sit for a day, and then you drink it. And that's very rich in not only the bifidus, but all the other types of positive strains of bacteria. So that's one thing to think about in terms of replacing that, because we really do tend to lack that good bacteria. We need that for digestion and for enzymes to help further digest our food. Also, it's also helpful to think about the anatomy of our small intestines. Our body is really quite amazing. The small intestines are about 1 inch in diameter, and they are this 22-foot long tube, like I was saying. But if you sort of cut a cross-section and just spread that 1 inch out, you'd have about the size of a blackboard in terms of surface area. Now, what the body has done to really create more surface area so it can absorb more of these small molecules that have been broken down and really use the food to its fullest, is it has what's called villi. And these are little fingers. And it's actually amazing, but our small intestines have like thousands of little fingers in them, little projections in our small intestines called villi that are used for the absorption of these small molecules, these amino acids and sugars and triglycerides and so on. So the body is really quite amazing, and if you were then to spread it out, you'd have a surface area the size of a tennis court. So you've gone from a small little board to a tennis court worth of surface area, which it means there's more room, more surface to absorb all these nutrients. That's how ingenious and amazing our body is. Now, you can think of these little fingers or these villi almost like the fingers of my hand. Now, our diet, the way most of us eat, consists of a lot of products that I call goo and glue. These are things like pasta and eggs and dairy. And this goo and glue and flour products, bread, all this tends to stick to the walls, not only of our small intestines, but our colon. What happens in the fingers in the wall of our small intestine, it starts building up between the fingers. So you have sort of a filling in of these spaces, and you go from having these fingers, this glove, these villi, you go to what looks like a mitten, and instead of having all of this surface area in and out, you just have the very tips of surface for the absorption. So you've gone through all this work in the mouth and the stomach and the intestines of digesting and breaking down these large particles to small particles, and now it's in the small intestine, and there's not enough surface area to be absorbed. So you've gone through a lot of work for nothing in a certain respect. And so that's really where diet comes into play. If you eat a diet that's rich in sort of live foods, fruits, vegetables that are uncooked, that have that wet, rich pulp to them, that sort of cleans through, it really bathes around the fingers and really cleans that out. And that's a real important aspect of digestion in terms of our diet. We want those villi to function so we can absorb those molecules. And it's a good reason for eliminating goo and glue type foods and pasta and so on from your diet. So that's one aspect I wanted to talk about. The very end of the small intestines is called the ileum. And the ileum is just at the very end. And that connects, there's a little valve called the ileocecal valve, which then connects into the colon, which is also the large intestines. I use those two terms interchangeably. On our body, we have our small intestines over here. The ileum would be on this side, and there's the ileocecal valve. And then it goes into the large intestines. And that valve is important because it has to do with the letting food through when it's ready to be put into the colon, so then it can be further absorbed and then eliminated. Next to the ileocecal valve is the cecum. That's the first part of the large intestine. That's this part over here. And attached to that is the appendix, a little tiny appendage. That's why it's called an appendix, attached onto this first part of the large intestine. And a lot of times, people have to have this removed because it's so infected that, their life may be in jeopardy if it bursts and they get that infection all over their abdomen. But also, I believe that there are certain functions to the appendix and that aid in the digestive process. I think it sort of almost has a lubricating function. It secretes things that allow lubrication of this area so that the food can then go through further. Because this is an area where things get really blocked up real easily. The ileocecal areas where things really get blocked. It's where the beginning of the large intestine, it's a lot of times where parasites live. Worms, in most of us, tend to be in this area. Some people, have associated with bad allergies being blocked up in this part of the large intestine. And this is a real crucial area for digestion, for the further absorption of molecules, and also for the elimination as the food goes from a liquid to a solid and then eliminated out the body. Food has gone all the way through the entire digestive tract now, through the small intestines, through the ileocecal valve, and now we're at the colon. And the colon is a very important part of our body because it's where food is not only finally the last remains of what was taken in or absorbed, but also it's where the byproducts, the waste is eliminated. So when food comes into, or rather waste product and nutrients and everything combines and comes into the large intestine, and by the way, the large intestine and the colon are the same thing, it's a liquid form, and what it does is it goes from a liquid to a solid as it's eliminated out of the body. So there's this eliminative function from a liquid to a solid, and it's also where there's a final absorption of nutrients. So our colon is very important for our digestive process. Now, also, I have another chart of the colon I wanted to show you. I think it further illustrates the state of most of our colons. This is the ideal colon, the prototype that you see in textbooks. And here's the appendix, the cecum, and it goes up and around the transverse colon, down the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and out the anus. And these smaller pictures over here are really probably what a lot of people's colons look like, and that's after years of diets that were those goo and glue diets that I was talking about, where things built up and provided stress onto the colons. Also, it's an example of what happens from the average American diet of eating meat products. What happens is we take in this goo and glue and all of these different things I've been talking about, and then we also are eating meat products that stay in our system sometimes for days before they're digested, because we're lacking the right amount of hydrochloric acid or enzymes, and it's hard to get the proteins broken down to amino acids. So we have all this undigested food stuck to the inside of the colon, and it's degenerating and rotting away. It's like putting food outside on your lawn in the heat for a few days, and that's what goes on in our body. So there's good reason for having a diet that's rich in liquid pulp that will clean through, like fruits and vegetables, for drinking wheatgrass juice, for doing enemas and colonics. So that's one of the important aspects of the colon. Also, it has a peristaltic motion, which is sort of a wave-like motion that helps eliminate food. And very often when it's all caked up, we don't have that normal peristalsis. That's also where enemas and wheatgrass juice implants and colonics come in. So that's all part of aiding the digestive processes to clean out the colon. So, and our diet is very important for the health of our digestive system. So I think we've given an overview of what happens when we eat food and how our body works to take that in and to be used by the body. Now, I've touched a little bit on diet. I want to just focus for a little while more on the type of food that you eat. And I always wonder how many people who are listening to me are vegetarian. And very often, most of us have been eating meat products all our lives, chicken, fish, beef, and so on. And I want to just present a case why one could reconsider that, or why one would want to be vegetarian. And I'm going to talk about this based on the anatomy and the physiology of our bodies, as opposed to animals that are meat eaters, cats, dogs, lions, so on. And I'll talk about the anatomy and physiology, how they compare, and then I'll talk a little bit about how animals are raised in this country and how that affects our health. So in terms of anatomy and physiology, meat eaters, cats, dogs, lions, so on, if you ever look at their paws or their claws, they have claws on them. They really have sharp fangs. If you look at our hands, we don't. We have sort of hands that are really designed for picking fruit. I mean, if you want to imagine that, we just can pick an apple off a tree. You don't see us going into like an animal in the field with our hands and clawing it and ripping it apart. That's a difference physiologically and anatomically. Also, our teeth. These meat-eating animals tend to have real sharp teeth, bicuspids. They can just go in and bite onto an animal and tear the flesh out. We have our teeth is not like that at all. They're flat. They're more for grinding than for biting into, which is another example one could use. Also, meat-eating animals, their jaws tend to go up and down, which is also another way of biting into flesh. Ours tends to rotate around. Our jaw can go in a circle like this, instead of up and down, as a way of sort of grinding food, and really suitable for fruits and vegetables and so on. Now, meat-eating animals as well, they have hydrochloric acid like we do in their stomachs to help digest this dense animal protein to the amino acids that they need, but they have about 20 times more hydrochloric acid than we do. And as I said, by the time we're 35 years old, we usually lack even what we are given to begin with, and we don't really digest our food Also, stress tends to shut down this hydrochloric acid, and so that's another example of how animals have more hydrochloric acid because they really need to digest that dense animal protein. Also, these meat-eating animals, their intestines are 3 times the body length, whereas ours are about 10 to 12 times our body length. So they have a way of getting the food through quicker than we do. Ours tends to sit, as I said, a long time. And this is another anatomical difference. So one can make a case based on that, that our diet is really more suitable to have fruits, vegetables, seeds in it, rather than dense protein, meat protein, just the way our body is set up. And that's just a brief example of one of the ways to look at that. The other thing to talk about is how animals are raised, and we've all heard a lot over the years about how cattle and beef is raised, the types of hormones that go in and so on. But only recently has there been news about chickens and how chickens are raised in this country. And years ago, there used to be the small chicken farmer, who grew his chickens and then sent it to, the market and so on. Today, most of the chickens are raised in 5 or 6 giant warehouse centers, and they never really leave these little cages or shoebox they have. They sort of sit there. They sit in this box, literally in their own feces. They're given tons of antibiotics because of this situation. And that's what they're taking in. Hormones are put in the feed, and that's to really help expedite the growth process so they can grow faster. And they have even added all sorts of hormones into the feed, and really seen some incredible things. Like they can get from a chicken egg to be ready to serve on a plate at your home, they can take 28 days, whereas by nature it would take 7 to 10 months normally. And so we've gone from 7 to 10 months to 28 days by the use of these different hormones and pellets that they've given. And this rapid growth is really great for the manufacturer, but you have to think what it does to our body. And cancer, for example, the definition of cancer is an uncontrollable growth of abnormal cells in your body. And so growing faster, of these, it may not be really what we're after. It may be cancer causing. And I think you have to keep that in mind when you're eating chickens that have been fed with these hormones, that it has to have an effect on your body. Also, the way the inspection process goes, like I'm a physician, for example, and when a patient comes to me, I've had a lot of training, I can converse with them, find out what's going on. An inspector in one of these factories doesn't have that kind of training. The chickens don't tell them what their health situation is, obviously. And there's this long conveyor belt. These chickens are sitting around in these giant tubs with their feces, and someone even referred to it as a fecal soup. Then they go on this conveyor belt, they go past an inspector who looks at them very quickly within seconds, and if he sees a tumor or something that looks abnormally, cuts it off and throws it into a pile. Very often that goes to the use of pet food, dog food, whatever. If a chicken is really in bad shape, they might even cut it up into pieces and sell it like just legs or thighs in the supermarket. When you think about the fact that they're cutting off the tumors, you have to remember that cancer, for instance, is a systemic disease. That means that the entire body is affected. Like for leukemia, for instance, you don't see a tumor. And they've done studies where they've put petroleum implants into animals and then studied how long it took for disease and cancer to develop. And it may have taken 4 or 5 months for the cancer to develop, but within 1 or 2 months, they had really bad end-stage organ damage, degenerative diseases, and so on. So it may have taken even a few months after that stage of toxicity to really experience, to see a tumor. So what they're cutting off isn't really accomplishing anything because there's still all the degenerative illness and toxins and so on in these chickens. So that's something to consider. If for me, it's very hard to even consider eating chicken knowing the process that it goes through in order to get, to your dinner plate. The other thing I want to talk about is there have been studies of Dr. Livingston here in California, and also others have studied certain bacteria, harmful bacteria. One that's called progenitor ascites, and that's spelled Progenitor-ascites, progenitor ascites. And that's been shown and linked to causing cancer. And even in organically grown, or rather in fertile eggs, for instance, and sometimes in organically grown chickens, that's been known to have that bacteria. So, sometimes we think, well, we can really make sure we get the right kind of food that's raised the right way, but there are other issues to consider as well. There are also moral and philosophical issues, I think, involved in eating meat, and some people feel very strongly about this. People can make a good case for not killing animals, and that's something that every one of us has to make a decision about in our life. But also just in terms of economics and in terms of the situation of the world. 80% of the grain in our country goes to feeding the animals for us to eat and consume. And that's like 22 pounds, let's say, of grain to produce 1 pound of flesh, meat to eat. That's like a 5% return. If you took all the grain that you're using to produce these animals, you could feed the entire world quite adequately, and there wouldn't be any such thing as world hunger or poverty in terms of people starving. So that's a consideration. Now, even as way back as 1961, the AMA journals were running articles linking heart disease, saying they even said in June of '61 in the journal, they said 97% of heart disease could be eliminated if people stopped eating meat. That's going way back. And they've also noted over the years of increased vitality and stamina of vegetarians. So there's a lot out there to really justify looking at whether or not you eat meat in your diet, whether you include meat, animal products in your diet. And like I said earlier, in our digestive process as well, it's very hard for us to break that down. So they tend to stay in our system longer, and they tend to basically rot and putrefy and cause a lot of degenerative illnesses and problems in our lives. So that's a good reason for really also not eating meat in our diet. Now, people always ask me about fish. How do I feel about fish? And I would say that, if you cook them, you may be destroying the nutrients anyway in the fish. Also, if you don't cook them, you eat them raw, you have to worry about parasites. Now, if you took a piece of fish and left it outside again on your front lawn in the heat for a day or two, think about what that fish would smell like, and that's what goes on in your body. It's really a good analogy. So even fish, and also you're not really sure about what's going on in the fish's body, and the same sort of inspection process goes on as I talked about for the chickens. So it's really a good case for not eating beef, chicken, or fish at this point, based on how they're raised and also based on our anatomy. So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, just to emphasize our diet, a diet of fresh fruits and vegetables, uncooked, seed sauces, fermented foods like Rejuvelac, like sauerkraut that are rich in enzymes. All of this really aids in our digestion, and that's a good way to clean our body out and also to get the nutrients we need so we don't have to put all this energy and work into breaking them down. And so that's what I wanted to talk about, and I thank you for allowing me to lecture to you today. Thank you.
This has been the third in the 6-tape Optimum Health Institute of San Diego video series. Over the years, many thousands of people have benefited from the program at the Optimum Health Institute of San Diego. It is now time to reach a larger audience. These videos have been produced by the Health Institute in order to spread the wonders of wheatgrass and the blessings of optimum health to the general public, and to assist you in maintaining the program at home. Each tape in this series addresses a different aspect of health, and together they present a complete, balanced, and proven program for achieving optimum physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. To obtain additional copies of this video, other videos in this series, or items mentioned in these videos, contact the Optimum Health Institute of San Diego at 6970 Central Avenue, Lemon Grove, California, 92045, or phone area code 619-464-3346.